I still remember the weight of my grandson's hand gripping mine that October evening, his small fingers trembling as we sat in my truck outside the Tim Hortons on Barrington Street. What he told me next would unravel everything I thought I knew about my daughter-in-law, and it would force me to make a choice that still keeps me awake some nights. You have to understand, when a 7-year-old looks at you with that kind of fear in his eyes and says, "Grandpa, we can't go to my house tonight. I heard something bad." You listen, even if every logical part of your brain tells you it's probably nothing. My name is Robert Mitchell, and I'm 63 years old. I've lived in Halifax my whole life, worked 35 years as a harbor pilot, guided more ships through these waters than I can count. I thought I'd seen everything, understood people, could read situations, but nothing prepared me for what my grandson Oliver uncovered, or the evil that was hiding in plain sight within my own family. Let me take you back to how this all started. My son, Daniel, he married Christine Beaumont 7 years ago. She came from money, old Halifax money, the kind that traces back to shipping magnates and railroad barons. Her family owned half of the South End, had their name on hospital wings and university buildings. Daniel, my boy, he was a good man but simple in his ambitions. He taught high school history, loved his students, loved his son Oliver more than anything in this world. Christine always seemed just a bit above it all, if you know what I mean. The kind of woman who smiled with her mouth, but never quite with her eyes. They lived in a beautiful Victorian home on Marlborough Avenue, one of those painted ladies with the turrets and wraparound porches. Christine had inherited it from her grandmother. Daniel had moved into her world, and if I'm being honest, I think he always felt like he was playing catch-up, trying to prove he belonged there. Oliver was born 6 months after they married. Premature, Christine always said, though my late wife Margaret had raised her eyebrows at that timeline. Margaret passed away 3 years ago. Cancer. And I think part of why I didn't see what was happening was because I was still drowning in my own grief. I'd stopped paying attention the way I should have. The first time I noticed something was off was about 4 months before that October evening. I'd picked Oliver up from school, as I did every Wednesday. Christine had started this routine of having me time on Wednesday afternoons, so I'd collect Oliver from Oxford School, and we'd spend the afternoon together. Usually, we'd go to Point Pleasant Park, throw stones in the water, get fish and chips from that place on Quinpool Road. But that particular day, Oliver was quiet. Not his usual chatty self, telling me about everything he'd learned, every kid he'd played with. When I asked him what was wrong, he'd looked at me with those serious gray eyes and said, "Grandpa, does Mommy love Daddy?" The question caught me off guard. "Of course she does, buddy. Why would you ask that?" He'd shrugged, looking down at his shoes. I heard her talking on the phone. She said she was tired of pretending. I'd laughed it off, told him he must have misunderstood, that grown-ups sometimes say things that sound different out of context. But the unease lingered. I should have pressed harder. I should have asked more questions. The weeks that followed, I started noticing other things. Daniel looked tired all the time, worn down. When I asked him how things were going, he'd force a smile and say everything was fine, just busy with work. Christine was around less and less, always at some charity function, some board meeting, some spa appointment. Oliver spent more time with me, which I loved, but it also made me wonder. Then came that Wednesday in October. I picked Oliver up as usual, and the moment he got in the truck, I could tell something was terribly wrong. His face was pale, his hands shaking. He wouldn't look at me. "Buddy, what happened?" I asked, pulling away from the school. He didn't answer right away, just stared out the window as we drove through the crisp autumn afternoon, leaves falling like snow around us. I didn't push. Sometimes kids need time to find their words. We were almost to Point Pleasant when he suddenly said, "Can we go somewhere else, Grandpa? Somewhere we can talk? Just you and me?" The seriousness in his voice made my chest tight. "Of course. Where do you want to go?" "I don't know. Just not home. Not the park. Somewhere inside." So I drove us to the Tim Hortons, got us both hot chocolates, and we sat in a corner booth away from everyone else. Oliver wrapped both hands around his cup, still not meeting my eyes. "Oliver, you're scaring me a bit here. What's going on?" He looked up then, and I saw it. Real fear. The kind of fear no 7-year-old should ever have to feel. "I wasn't supposed to be home yesterday," he started, his voice barely above a whisper. Daddy had conferences after school, so I was supposed to go to aftercare. But I felt sick, my tummy hurt. So the nurse called Mommy, and she picked me up early. Okay, I said gently. Were you sick? Are you feeling better now? I wasn't really sick. I just wanted to go home. He looked ashamed. I lied to the nurse. I know that's bad, but I wanted to see Mommy because she's never home anymore, and I miss her. My heart broke a little. That's understandable, buddy. So what happened when you got home? Mommy didn't know I was in the house. She dropped me off and said she had to make an important phone call, told me to play in my room quiet. So I went upstairs, but then I realized I left my backpack in the kitchen. When I came back down, I heard her talking on the phone in Daddy's office. Oliver's hands were shaking harder now. I reached across and held them, trying to steady him. She was talking really serious, Grandpa. Not like her normal voice. She said, "The policy is worth $2 million if it looks accidental. The house is old. Electrical fire would make sense. The inspection report I paid for will back it up." The blood drained from my face. "Are you absolutely sure that's what you heard? Exactly those words?" He nodded, tears starting to spill down his cheeks. "I know what those words mean, Grandpa. We learned about insurance in school, about accidents and fires. And I know Daddy has one of those policies because he told me it's to make sure me and Mommy are okay if something happens to him." My mind was racing. This couldn't be real. People didn't actually do this, especially not to their own husbands, not to their children's fathers. "Did your mother see you? Does she know you heard?" "No." I ran back upstairs quiet. "But Grandpa, there's more." He was crying openly now. "This morning, when Daddy left for work early, I heard Mommy on the phone again. She said, 'Tomorrow night, he'll be home alone with Oliver. I'll be at the charity gala. Everyone will see me there. The fire starts at 10. Make sure it looks like he fell asleep with a candle burning.'" I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "Oliver, where is your father right now?" "At school. He has parent-teacher conferences until 8 tonight. Mommy said she has her gala thing, and I'm supposed to go home with you after school tomorrow because she'll be out late. But Grandpa, tomorrow is when she said. Tomorrow night. That's when everything clicked into horrible, crystal clarity. Tomorrow was Thursday, Christine's annual fundraiser gala at the Halifax Club, the social event she'd been planning for months. The perfect alibi. Daniel would be home with Oliver, probably exhausted from a long day, might actually fall asleep on the couch like he often did. And a house that old, with its original wiring, its antique fixtures, a fire would be tragically believable. "We need to tell your father," I said, already pulling out my phone. "No." Oliver grabbed my hand. "Grandpa, what if Daddy doesn't believe me? What if he tells Mommy? What if it makes everything happen faster?" He had a point. Daniel loved Christine, might rationalize away his son's fears, might confront her and put himself in even more danger. And if Christine suspected Oliver knew, who's to say what she might do? Okay, buddy. We're going to figure this out. But we need to be smart about it. My mind was working through possibilities. "Did you hear anything else? Any names? Any other details?" Oliver wiped his nose on his sleeve. "She said a name. Wayne, I think. She said Wayne knows what to do. He's done this kind of work before." And she laughed. "Grandpa." She laughed and said, "Poor Daniel. At least he'll die thinking his family is provided for." The casual cruelty of it made me sick. This woman had eaten dinners at my table, had held my hand at Margaret's funeral, had smiled at me across birthday cakes and Christmas mornings, and all the while, she'd been planning to murder my son. "All right, here's what we're going to do," I said, my old military training kicking in. I'd served in the Navy before my harbor pilot days, and while it had been 40 years, you don't forget that kind of thinking. "First, you're going to stay with me tonight. I'll call your father and tell him you're not feeling well, that you're staying over. He won't question it. We do sleepovers all the time. But what about tomorrow night, when Mommy expects the fire? Tomorrow night, neither you nor your father will be in that house. Trust me on this. But we need evidence, Oliver. We need proof of what she's planning, or no one will believe us. You said she was in your father's office when she made these calls?" He nodded. "On the desk phone. She always uses that one for her private calls, because it's a different line, which meant different bills, different records. Does your father have access to the phone records for that line? I don't know. Maybe? I thought for a moment, then pulled out my phone and called someone I hadn't spoken to in almost 5 years. Tommy Chen, an old Navy buddy who'd gone into private investigation after his service. He owed me a favor from way back, and I was about to collect. Tommy? It's Robert Mitchell. I need your help, and I need it yesterday. Over the next hour, sitting in that Tim Hortons, while Oliver slowly drank his hot chocolate, I laid out everything to Tommy. To his credit, he didn't question, didn't doubt, just listened and then said, I'll need 12 hours. Can you keep the kids safe until then? He's not leaving my sight. Good. And Robert, if what this boy heard is accurate, you're dealing with someone who's already decided murder is an acceptable option. Be careful. We left the Tim Hortons as the sun was setting. I called Daniel from the parking lot, told him Oliver had come down with a stomach bug at school, and I was taking him home with me to avoid spreading anything. Daniel sounded relieved, actually. Said he had a brutal evening of conferences ahead, and this would give him time to focus. Thanks, Dad. You're a lifesaver. If only he knew how literally true that might be. That night, Oliver slept in my guest room. Before he dozed off, he asked me, Grandpa, why would Mommy want to hurt Daddy? Doesn't she love us? How do you explain evil to a 7-year-old? How do you tell him that sometimes people love money more than they love anything else, that greed can turn someone into a monster? Some people get lost, buddy. They forget what's important. But your dad loves you more than anything in this world, and so do I. And we're going to make sure he stays safe. Promise? I promise. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table, drinking coffee and thinking about all the signs I'd missed. The way Christine had insisted on that large life insurance policy, saying it was responsible planning. The way she'd gradually isolated Daniel from his friends, his colleagues outside of work. The way she'd started spending more time away from home this past year, always with an excuse, always with an alibi. My phone rang at 6 in the morning. Tommy, you were right to call me. I've got records from the phone company, pulled some strings with a contact there. The office line at that address has made 17 calls in the past month to a number registered to Wayne Boudreau. He's got a record, Robert. Arson for hire, served 8 years, got out 18 months ago. My blood ran cold. Can you prove the connection? I've got the call logs, but that's not all. I did some digging into Christine Beaumont's finances. She's broke, Robert. Completely cleaned out. Her trust fund dried up 2 years ago. Bad investments, and expensive habits. The house has a second mortgage she took out without your son's knowledge. She's 3 months behind on payments. And get this, she increased Daniel's life insurance policy 6 months ago from $500,000 to $2 million. He would have had to sign off on it, but I'm betting she convinced him it was smart financial planning. Everything was becoming horrifyingly clear. Christine had been living beyond her means, probably for years, maintaining the facade of old money while drowning in debt. And Daniel, with his teacher's salary and his life insurance policy, was worth more to her dead than alive. There's something else, Tommy continued. I got into her email. Not exactly legal, so this wouldn't hold up in court. But you need to know, she's been corresponding with Wayne Boudreau for 2 months. The plan is detailed. Fire starts in the electrical panel in the basement tomorrow night at 10. Boudreau enters through the back door, which Christine is leaving unlocked. He sets it up to look like faulty wiring, gets out. House goes up. Old Victorian like that. Wood frame. It'll burn fast and hot. What about Oliver? I asked, my voice shaking. A pause. In the emails, Christine specifies that Oliver is supposed to be out of the house. She's not a complete monster, I guess. Just wants her husband dead and the insurance money. She's still a monster, I said flatly. No one who plans this kind of thing gets credit for drawing a line anywhere. Agreed. So what's your play? I'd been thinking about this all night. Can you get this information to the police in a way that they can use it? That's tricky. Most of what I have was obtained through methods that wouldn't pass legal muster. But the phone records are solid. And if the police were to get an anonymous tip about Wayne Boudreau planning an arson for tomorrow night at that address, they could potentially set up surveillance. Do it. But Tommy, I need a favor. I need you to make sure that neither Daniel nor Oliver are anywhere near that house tomorrow night, and I need Christine to think everything is going according to plan. What are you thinking? I'm thinking we let her dig her own grave. She wants to be at that gala, surrounded by witnesses? Perfect. Let her be there. Let her establish her alibi while we establish the truth. Over the next few hours, Tommy and I worked out a plan. He would contact the Halifax Police Arson Unit with an anonymous tip about Wayne Boudreau, providing just enough information to get them interested without revealing how we'd obtained it. He'd suggest they might want to watch Boudreau's movements tomorrow evening. Meanwhile, I would handle my family. Around 8 that morning, I called Daniel. "Dad, how's Oliver? Is he feeling better?" "Much better, actually. Listen, Daniel, I wanted to run something by you. You know how I've been talking about taking Oliver up to the cabin for some ice fishing? I was thinking maybe we could go tomorrow after school. Just the two of us. Have a boys' weekend. It would give you and Christine some time alone, and you've been working so hard lately." The cabin was a fishing shack I kept up in Muscodoboit Harbor, about an hour outside Halifax. No cell service, no distractions. Safe. Tomorrow? That's sudden. I'd have to check with Christine. Actually, I already mentioned it to her yesterday when I picked Oliver up. She thought it was a great idea, said you both could use a break. The lie came easily. I forgot to bring it up to you last night with all the conference chaos. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that would actually be great. Oliver would love that. Perfect. I'll keep him with me today. Get him excused from school, and we'll head up tomorrow morning. That work? Sure, Dad, thanks. Christine has that big gala thing tomorrow night anyway, so the timing actually works out perfectly. That's because she planned it that way. I thought, but didn't say. After hanging up with Daniel, I looked at Oliver, who was eating breakfast at my kitchen table. You and I are going fishing tomorrow, buddy. How does that sound? He looked relieved. Really? So we'll be far away? Very far away. And your dad will be safe too. How? That was the tricky part. I couldn't just tell Daniel the truth and expect him to play along. He'd either not believe it, or he'd confront Christine, or his behavior would tip her off that something was wrong. I needed him out of that house without him knowing why. The solution came to me around lunchtime. I called Daniel's principal, a woman named Margaret Donovan, who I'd met at several school events. "Miss Donovan, this is Robert Mitchell, Daniel's father. I'm so sorry to bother you, but I'm in a bit of a bind. My son's wife has a big event tomorrow night, and she's been planning a surprise for Daniel, a romantic evening after. But I made a mistake and double-booked Oliver for a fishing trip with me at the same time. Now Christine is worried Daniel will come straight home after work and ruin the surprise. Is there any way Daniel could stay late tomorrow, maybe help with some after-school activity or something, just until 8 or so?" She bought it completely. "Oh, how sweet. Actually, yes, we have a drama club rehearsal tomorrow evening that could use another supervisor. I can ask Daniel to help out. He's always willing. That would be perfect. And if you could present it as if it were your idea? I don't want him to feel obligated because I asked. Of course, I'll mention it to him today." All the pieces were falling into place. Oliver and I would be at the cabin, unreachable. Daniel would be at the school until 8, with witnesses. Christine would be at her gala, establishing her alibi. And Wayne Boudreau would walk into a trap. That night, I sat Oliver down and explained as much as I thought he could handle. Tomorrow, we're going to go on that fishing trip. And while we're gone, some police officers are going to catch the person your mother hired. They'll stop the fire before it starts. Your dad will never be in danger. What about Mommy? That was the question I'd been dreading. Your mother is going to have to face the consequences of what she planned to do. Will I still see her? I don't know, buddy. Probably not for a while. And when you do, things will be very different. He was quiet for a long time. Then, I love Mommy. Even though she wanted to do something bad. I know you do. And that's okay. Love is complicated sometimes. Thursday morning arrived cold and gray. Typical November weather in Nova Scotia. I packed up my truck with fishing gear and supplies, got Oliver bundled up, and we headed out around 9. Before we left, I called Tommy. Everything set on your end? Police have Boudreau under surveillance as of 6 this morning. They got a warrant based on his history and the tip. They're watching his apartment, his truck, everything. He makes a move toward that house tonight. They'll be on him. And Daniel? According to your source, he's been asked to supervise the drama rehearsal until 8. That gets him clear. What about Christine? The gala starts at 7. She'll be there, surrounded by Halifax's elite, drinking champagne and pretending to care about whatever charity they're supporting this year. She won't know anything's wrong until it's too late. The drive to Muscotaboid Harbor was quiet. Oliver watched the landscape change from city to forest, his small face pressed against the window. About halfway there, he said, "Grandpa, will Daddy be mad at me for telling on Mommy? Your father will be grateful, Oliver. You saved his life. You're a hero." "I don't feel like a hero. I feel sad." "You can be both, buddy. You can be a hero and still be sad about what had to happen." We spent the day at the cabin trying to act normal, though my mind was back in Halifax. We fished off the dock, caught nothing, ate sandwiches I'd packed. I tried to keep Oliver distracted, keep him from thinking too much about what was happening back home. As evening fell and the sky turned that deep purple blue of dusk, I found myself watching the clock. 10 was when it was supposed to happen, when Wayne Boudreau was supposed to enter the house, set the fire, and leave my son to die. At 9:45, I stepped outside the cabin and checked my phone. Still no signal, as expected, but I'd arranged with Tommy to drive to the nearest spot with service at 10:30 to get an update. Inside, Oliver was curled up on the couch under a blanket, trying to watch a movie on my old DVD player. He wasn't really watching, though, just staring at the screen. "It's almost 10, he said softly. "I know, buddy. Is Daddy safe?" "Your dad is surrounded by people at his school right now. He's safe." At 10:15, I told Oliver to stay put and drove my truck up the road to a spot I knew had spotty cell coverage. My phone exploded with messages the moment I got signal. The first was from Tommy, time-stamped at 10:03 p.m. "They got him. Boudreau in custody. Daniel safe. Call me." My hands were shaking as I dialed. "Robert, Jesus, I've been trying to reach you." Tommy sounded wired. It went down perfectly. Boudreau showed up at the house at 9:55 p.m., parked 2 blocks away, approached on foot, had a bag full of accelerant and timing devices. Police grabbed him as he was picking the back door lock. "He's already talking, trying to cut a deal." Gave up Christine immediately. And Daniel? Still at the school, completely unaware. They're sending officers to inform him now. What about Christine? That's where it gets interesting. She was at the gala, as planned. Gave a speech at 9:30 p.m. about community support and family values. Real piece of work. Police waited until the speech was over, then took her into custody right there in the ballroom. Apparently, she tried to run, made it as far as the coat check before they caught her. I sat in my truck, engine running, heat blasting, and felt 20 different emotions at once. Relief, anger, grief, satisfaction. "The press is going to have a field day with this," Tommy continued. "Wealthy socialite attempts to murder teacher husband for insurance money. It's got everything. I don't care about the press. I care about my son and my grandson. They're safe, Robert. That's what matters." I drove back to the cabin and found Oliver right where I'd left him, still staring at the TV. "Your dad is okay," I said. "The police stopped it. They arrested the man your mother hired, and they arrested your mother too." Oliver started crying then, great heaving sobs that shook his whole body. I held him while he cried, this little boy who'd had to grow up too fast, who'd had to make impossible choices, who'd had to accept that his mother was a monster. "I want my dad," he whispered. "I know, buddy. We'll see him tomorrow. I promise." We drove back to Halifax first thing Friday morning. Daniel called around 8, his voice shaky and confused. "Dad, I need to see you. Something's happened. Something with Christine. The police were here. They're saying things that don't make sense. I'm on my way. I've got Oliver with me." When we arrived at Daniel's school, he was waiting in the parking lot, looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. The moment Oliver saw him, he ran, and Daniel scooped him up, holding him like he'd never let go. "What's going on, Dad?" "They're saying Christine hired someone to burn down our house, to kill me." "That can't be true. That's insane." "It's true, son. And Oliver's the reason you're alive." Over the next hour, sitting in Daniel's classroom, surrounded by children's artwork and history posters, I told him everything. How Oliver had overheard, what we'd discovered, how we'd stopped it. Daniel's face went through 100 expressions. Disbelief, shock, horror, grief, anger, and finally, settling on a kind of numb acceptance. "I knew things were bad," he said quietly. "I knew she was unhappy, that the money was tight, but this, I never imagined. How do you plan to murder someone you've lived with for 7 years? Someone you made a child with? Desperation does terrible things to people, I said. And I think Christine was desperate. Her whole life, she'd had money, status, a certain position in society. When that started slipping away, she couldn't handle it. Rather than adjust her expectations or ask for help, she chose the darkest path possible. Daniel looked at Oliver, who was sitting on the floor with some building blocks, trying to pretend he wasn't listening to every word. "You saved my life, buddy. You know that?" Oliver nodded, not looking up. "I was scared you wouldn't believe me. I'm so sorry you were scared. I'm so sorry you had to carry that weight." Daniel got down on the floor next to his son. "But you did the right thing, the bravest thing. You told Grandpa, and Grandpa knew what to do. You're a hero." "That's what Grandpa said. But I don't feel like one." "Heroes rarely do," Daniel said softly. "They just do what needs to be done, even when it's hard, even when it hurts." The legal process that followed was brutal. Christine was charged with conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and insurance fraud. Wayne Boudreau, in exchange for his testimony, got a reduced sentence but would still spend the next 15 years in prison. The trial was set for the following spring. In the meantime, Daniel had to pick up the pieces of his shattered life. The house on Marlborough Avenue was sold to pay off the debts Christine had accumulated. Daniel and Oliver moved into a smaller place in the North End. A modest apartment, but a fresh start. Oliver started seeing a therapist to help process the trauma of what he'd witnessed, what he'd done. Some days were good, some were hard. Children are resilient, but they're not invincible. Christine's family, the mighty Beaumonts, with their old money and their prestigious name, distanced themselves entirely. They paid for her legal defense, but made it clear she was on her own beyond that. The scandal had tarnished their reputation, and they were more concerned with damage control than with justice or compassion. I spent a lot of time with Daniel and Oliver that winter. We had dinners together, watched hockey games, did ordinary things. Slowly, gradually, they started to heal. The trial, when it finally came, was swift. Christine's lawyers tried to argue temporary insanity, financial stress, postpartum depression that had never been diagnosed. But the evidence was overwhelming. The emails, the phone records, Wayne Boudreau's testimony about the detailed planning she'd done. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before finding her guilty on all counts. She was sentenced to 25 years to life. I attended the sentencing. I wanted to look her in the eye one last time, to understand if there was any remorse, any recognition of what she'd tried to do. She wouldn't meet my gaze, just stared straight ahead as the judge read her sentence, her face blank. As they led her away in handcuffs, she looked back once, not at Daniel, not at the gallery where her family sat, but at Oliver, who Daniel had kept home from school that day specifically so he wouldn't have to see this. She'd never get that final look, that last attempt at whatever she'd hoped to convey. Good. Now, 3 years later, life has found a new normal. Oliver is 10, thriving in school, still sees his therapist monthly, but doing well. He's a thoughtful kid, more serious than most children his age, but there's light in his eyes again. He still loves fishing, still spends Wednesdays with me, though now it's because he wants to, not because his father needs the help. Daniel remarried last year, a kind woman named Sarah who teaches at his school, who knows the whole story and loves them anyway. She's good to Oliver, never tries to replace Christine but fills a role that was empty. They're happy, or as happy as you can be after something like this. As for me, I think about that October evening often, about the choice Oliver made to tell me what he'd heard, about the trust he placed in me to believe him and act. I think about how easily it could have gone differently, if he'd been too scared to speak up, if I'd dismissed his concerns as childish imagination, if I hadn't had the resources and the connections to investigate properly. The lesson here, if there is one, is this: listen to your children, not just to their words, but to their fears, their instincts, their observations of the world. Children see things we miss. They hear things we dismiss. They understand more than we give them credit for. And when a child trusts you enough to bring you their darkest worry, their most terrifying suspicion, you honor that trust. You take it seriously. You investigate. You protect. Because Oliver was right. His fear was justified. His instincts were sound. And by listening to him, by believing him, we saved a life. Not all monsters hide in shadows. Some sit across from you at the breakfast table. Some tuck you in at night. Some wear expensive dresses and give speeches about community values while planning murder. But children often see the truth before we do. And when they try to tell us, we need to listen. That's what I learned. That's what Oliver taught me. That's what saved my son. Trust your children. Listen to their fears. Investigate their concerns. Because sometimes, the most important thing you'll ever do is take a 7-year-old's warning seriously, even when every logical part of your brain says it can't be true. Sometimes, especially then, it is. And if you're a parent, or a grandparent, or anyone who has children in your life who trust you, remember this. They're counting on you to believe them when it matters most. Don't let them down. 3 years on, Oliver still comes to me sometimes and says, "Thank you for believing me, Grandpa." And I tell him the same thing every time. Thank you for being brave enough to tell me, because that's what saved us all. Not my investigation skills, not my connections, not my planning. Oliver's courage, a 7-year-old boy's decision to speak up about something terrifying, to trust that the adults in his life would do the right thing. We talk about stranger danger, about safety rules, about not getting in cars with people you don't know. But we don't talk enough about what to do when the danger is someone you love. When the threat comes from inside the house. When the person planning harm is wearing a familiar face. That's the conversation we need to have more often. That's the lesson we need to teach. Because evil doesn't always announce itself with obvious signs. Sometimes it smiles at you across the dinner table and asks you to pass the salt while planning your death. But children have an instinct for wrongness, even when they can't articulate it, even when they don't have the vocabulary or the context to understand what they're sensing. They know when something is off, when someone is pretending, when danger is lurking beneath normalcy. Our job is to create an environment where they feel safe bringing those feelings to us, where they know they'll be believed, supported, protected, where their fears are validated, not dismissed. That's what I did right with Oliver. Not the investigation, not the plan to catch Christine, but simply believing him when he said he'd heard something that scared him. Taking his fear seriously. Acting on his information as if it were gospel truth. Because it was. And because of that, my son is alive today. Because a child spoke up and an adult listened. That's the story I want you to take away from this. Not the dramatic details of catching a would-be murderer. Not the satisfaction of justice served. But the simple, crucial importance of listening to children when they tell you something is wrong. It might save a life. It saved mine, in a way. It certainly saved Daniel's, and it saved Oliver from a lifetime of guilt and what-ifs because his warning was heard and acted upon. So listen to your children. Believe your children. Protect your children, even when the threat comes from unexpected places. That's my message. That's my lesson. That's what 3 years of reflection has taught me. Listen, believe, act. Everything else follows from there.